Welcome back and welcome to this year's CDIS Spring Conference panel on bug bounty, a form of crowdsourced ethical hacking. And a special warm welcome to the panelists, whom I will introduce in a few minutes. As you might remember, my name is David Olgart, and I'm the Vice Director of CDIS. I'm also one of the liaisons from the Swedish Armed Forces to CDIS. For me, this panel is a vital outreach activity on the conference agenda and serves the purpose of keeping the buzz going, so to say, on the need for a bug bounty program, something that the Swedish Minister for Civil Defense, Carl-Oskar Bohlin, often mentions. The setup of today's panel will be as follows. Each panelist will have 3 to 5 minutes to present their take on an experience from bug bounty programs. After that, I will break the ice with a few questions of my own to the panel on the subject, and then open up for questions from the audience to the panel. For those of you who want to engage with the panel during the Q&A session, please don't forget to introduce yourself with name and organization in the microphone that will be passed around. Now, let's move on to the panel. I'm very happy that Camilla Lundahl, Mats Ögren, Sandra Alvin, and last but not least, Professor Virgil Gligor, were able to prioritize and make the effort to be with us here today at this CDIS Spring Conference. Now over to some formal introductions. Camilla Lundahl is currently the head of IT security at Avanza Bank, with experience from several business sectors and a total of 24 years from working in the security domain. 5 years ago, Camilla planned and implemented a company-wide bug bounty program at Avanza Bank. Armed with the know-how and experience from that effort at Avanza Bank, Camilla was inspired to formulate a national bug bounty program for Sweden. The program outline is part of the recent report on cybersecurity for increased competitiveness published by the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, IVA, last October. Mats Ögren, welcome.
Thank you.
Mats is responsible for SwAF in the Nordic region. SwAF is a leading bug bounty platform with headquarters in Paris, running bug bounty programs for many government agencies such as the French Ministry of Defense, the Swiss Confederation, the government of Quebec, and the government of Singapore. Sandra Alvin, welcome. Sandra is the National Security Officer at Microsoft Sweden, a position she has held for more than 3 years. Sandra has more than 20 years of experience from working with information and cybersecurity from both the private and public sectors. Professor Virgil Gligor, welcome as well. Virgil is a professor of electrical and computer engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. His research interests, as you have heard, ranges from access control mechanisms, penetration analysis, and denial of service protection to cryptographic protocols and applied cryptography. Gligor was an associate editor of several ACM and IEEE journals and the editor-in-chief of the IEEE Transactions on Dependable and Secure Computing. He received the 2006 National Information System Security Award jointly given by NIST and NSA, the 2011 Outstanding Innovation Award of ACM ZigZag, and the 2013 Technical Achievement Award of IEEE Computer Society. He was inducted into the US National Cybersecurity Hall of Fame in 2019. So as you see, we have a very distinguished panel today. I know I'm looking forward to learning more and get inspired from your experience and thoughts on do's and don'ts related to bug bounty programs, and I do hope the audience is too. To me, a bug bounty program is really a crowdsourced ethical hacking activity conducted in a controlled and secure manner. A national bug bounty program could be key to creating and sustaining an ecosystem of stakeholders and actors in society for a more resilient and robust cyber domain. It might also be a fun and effective way to attract more people to start working with cyber-related challenges and solutions in industry and academia. I encourage you all to take this opportunity to engage with the panel and hope you will all be inspired what Camilla, Sandra, Mats, and Professor Verdel shares with you today. And with that, I will open up for the panelists for their opening statements, starting with Professor Virgil Digger.
Thank you. So, usually when I run a panel, I tell the panelists, please give me 3 questions that I can ask you during the panel. And of course, David, being an experienced panel manager, asked for the same thing. So I sent him 3 questions, which if he asked me, I could not answer. So let me try. So my first question is, what type of organization would run and manage a bug bounty program? Who should not run one? Well, okay, so the first type of organization is software producers. You know, places like Google, that started maybe 15 years ago, Microsoft, maybe 10 years ago, SAP, and so on. So it turns out that they paid people between 5,000 and 250,000 per bugs which were disclosed, depending upon their severity and their extent. Another class of people who should be involved in the program are some government organizations, such as the non-intelligence part of the defense industry. So for example, in the US we had Hack the Pentagon, 1,410 hackers, first bug found in 13 minutes, 200 bugs in 6 hours. Most expensive payout was $3,500, average about close to $600. Hack the US Army, hack the US Navy, hack the US Air Force. These are all very successful programs. But the total bounties were actually small. So for example, the total bounty for hacking the US Army was about $100,000. That's very little compared to what the software producers pay. Nevertheless, these are very prestigious activities. So hackers like that prestige that comes from hacking various parts of the US Department of Defense. Which organization should never pay or run a program? One is intelligence organizations. Absolutely not. Why? Because hackers would have to begin with access to very classified systems. And you don't want to do that. Instead, intelligence organizations have their pools of hackers, which are actually contractors. They are not people of the street, right? And this has started, at least in the US, with late 80s, and it went on. Another class of people who should not run bug bounty programs are business enterprises. Why? Because a lot of business enterprises don't know, don't have the money, don't have the time how to patch existing vulnerabilities. They actually pass on the responsibility of fixing bugs to the software producers. Okay, so then, please tell me when my time is up.
Go for 1 more minute.
Okay, so 2 more questions are that I'll address a bit later in details are, what's the value of a zero-day bug? How should an organization pay? How should they decide how to pay? It turns out that for a enterprise, business enterprise, I'm talking about users, not producers, the average time to discovery of a bug that's being exploited of a breach is about 200 days. And the average cost, as you've seen, is anywhere between 2.9 and 5 million. So consequently, paying a researcher anywhere between $600 to $3,500 or $25,000 to $100,000 in the industry is really not very much. How do they decide how to pay? Depending upon the severity of the bug and the number of companies that are affected. So if you are a Microsoft and everybody uses your Windows systems and you find a critical bug, you're going to pay a lot because there are your M, the number of defenders, is very high. If you're talking about a more specialized system, it's not that interesting. Lastly, when should a bug be reported to the world and covered by CVE and CWE and CVSS? As soon as discovered, after responsible release, after the patch is installed, that all depends on who discovers it and when. So we will have time to talk about it a little later.
Perfect. So with that, I will hand over to the representative of the giant, Sandra.
It's the software.
Yeah, giant producer.
The software.
Exactly.
Giant is the software.
Sandra, please.
Yes, and my experience, actually, most of my experience actually came before joining the tech giant Microsoft. In my previous life, I was working as a head of digital security for one of our big fashion retailers, and learning that most business enterprises actually are also software developers, also software producers. If we look at today, we have a lot of e-commerce, we have a lot of different types of portals, web portals, etc. And a lot of them are actually based on platforms where the enterprise themselves is developing on top of it. So most software producers today are actually producing platforms that their customers, so the business enterprises themselves, including governments, municipalities, etc., are developing on, and etc. get vulnerabilities in. So I worked for one of these big global fast retail companies that had their own online sales store, where a lot of security researchers try to call in via the regular, the call desk, where you say that, yeah, I bought a T-shirt that was too small, can I change it, kind of call desk. Say, hey, we found a vulnerability, can we report it somewhere? And our online sales team got so tired of this, so they actually for a year nagged on me saying that, can't we just fix this, can't we implement a bug bounty program? And that was a process, huge process, not because we didn't see the value of it from a kind of a security perspective and a developer perspective, but because there are so many internal processes speaking about how quickly you patch systems that had to be developed for this to get the buy-in. I mean, why pay for something that they report in for free, right? They call it in, so why should we pay for it if they call it in still? That was one, of course. And then, while we have PCI DSS, we have to do pen tests. We already pay for pen tests, so why do we need to pay for this as well? So a lot of experience in dealing with internal politics, building the business case for it, etc. But eventually we implemented it. First as a trial, as a private bug bounty program, meaning that it was only a select few invited hackers, and then eventually opening it up to the public, and it was very successful. So I'm looking forward to sharing some more of that experience later on in the panel.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you. So, Mats,
yes,
coming from the platform perspective, what can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that there is a lot of business enterprises actually using bug bounty, and it's actually my biggest segment, private sector. So I would agree to what you said, that there is, like, every company is developing code on their own these days. Not every company, but many actually do. So they have a lot of need to test their own applications. I actually do have an example of a client that does not develop themselves, but they just use bug bounty as a means to check their SLAs. So if they can, they have actually clauses with their developing company that if they find bugs on their stuff, their provider has to pay to them. Basically, it's not my business, but there are several different setups of bug bounty. Also, there are what I would call maybe a bit like fake bug bounty. So in the case of the Department of Defense in France, it's actually only allowed for their own people to test. You cannot invite the whole crowd in that case, so that's a way of controlling such an environment. Yeah, so, well, what should I add more? Maybe there is a bit like scare about the whole thing in the market. Like, are our name of the company can be a bit scary to some people when they see it. Especially when it comes to public sector. I do have worked with Nordic public sector, not Swedish yet though, because it's not really accepted from what I've learned in Sweden yet. But I hope it will be one day, that we will be closer to Europe and US when it comes to, or continental Europe, when it comes to using crowdsourcing for security purposes.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you, Mats. So moving over to Camilla, what are your initial experiences from bug bounty programs?
From the beginning, I think it's a few of you know about bug bounty already. Some of you haven't heard of it before. And if you look at the company, you have several expertise areas. You have developers, technicians, you have the managers, and everyone has different knowledge about cybersecurity. And then you start talking about bug bounty. It's like, is this fiction? And when you talk about hackers, then they get scared. So it's, but it's been 6 years ago when I started as a head of IT security at the bank. And the first years, as you know, you need to do a lot of things. You get the responsibility, and then you need to show action. And when you talk about vulnerability management, it's more about patch management and have control over your assets and all of that. So even if I talk to people that know cybersecurity, they always tell me like, hey, you should do the essential stuff first, because we have the regulations and we need to do a lot of things, but we also have a lack of time. And I really wanted to hack the bank. That was my goal. I needed to have fun in my job. And I didn't want to have discussions around perimeter or not patching fast enough, or we don't have time because we need to do something like production, like that kind of stuff. But I also understand that it's difficult to motivate people to take care of their systems and clients, like their stuff. And they really need to show progress in production, of course. So the first thing, I think, it was my, just like, the OODA loop, orient and decide and act and all that. You need to like know your company first and see who is the informal leader, who is the person that will decide for you, who will promote your change, and what motivates people in the company. So you have like, the motivation is the thing that I wanted to grasp with bug bounty. It wasn't the pay to a hacker. Sorry about that, but it wasn't that goal I had. It was a motivation so that people would understand that it was something I needed to do. But if you get a vulnerability today and it's low or medium, people will try to find ways to make other stuff during the day instead. So with bug bounty, I found out how to hack the bank and find the critical vulnerabilities so that people really understood that, hey, we could be finished tomorrow. The bank is hacked. So like configuration mistakes or critical vulnerabilities that we should take care of, that kind of stuff really motivates people. And then you don't have the discussion about, I don't think I'm going to do this today, because they understand it's a bad thing. But you should also know you have different people with different knowledge in the company. So even if you say it's a critical vulnerability, they wouldn't always understand it. And that is a problem. I think that is why we were going to talk about national bug bounty program later, because people don't really understand secure development all the way. So I found out like some people do and some people don't, and you need them to work fast with vulnerabilities to fix them. So we won't have the critical vulnerabilities in the bank. So that is, I want to choose the word motivation for change. And more should hack their companies, hack the bank, hack the Air Force, or something like that. Yeah, I think it's a fun way to make people collaborate also.
Okay, thank you. So Camilla, apart from getting the motivation and tell senior management to go hack themselves, can you name one planning activity or one preparation activity that is key to have success with launching such a program?
Don't use the word hacker. That is one thing. You should call it security testers instead, because people will automatically think that it's a bad thing. A hacker is a bad person. Instead, I'm talking about security experts around Sweden that I want, or in another country that I want to work with. So start with that. And that's why, for example, the board of director, Sven Hagström, the top level, he came up to me just when I was starting this program. I got the attention from managers, and he said, "Hey, we shouldn't do this." I'd worked 2 years for this program and wanted to launch it, but suddenly he came up to me and said, "Have any other bank done this before?" No, not in Sweden, but in America they have. I don't really think you should do this. So instead, I went back to my boss that I had then, and he was the person that really helped this program to be launched. So he was the person that helped me with the managers, the top level managers, and he also said to me, "Hey, even if the board of directors, it's very important to listen to them, but they don't have the operational responsibility of the company." And suddenly I have a chance. I had the managers that listened to me, I had the money, and the risk people also listened to it. So you need to think about the hierarchy sometimes.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. So moving back to academia,
Yeah.
Virgil, how do you foresee that academia can contribute to bug bounty programs?
Well, 3 ways, actually, in the past. So one is the most common one, namely graduate students, undergraduate students, faculty discover invariably bugs, zero-day bugs and attacks. And they disclose them now responsibly. In other words, they have to contact the producing companies and tell them what the problem is, get an acknowledgement from them, and then at the next conference, when they publish a paper, they say, "We got acknowledgement from company X, Y, and W that this is a problem," and they fix them. 0 cost. So this is the best kind of bounty that an industry as a business can hope for. So incentives, the incentive here is acknowledgement in publications, public acknowledgement. The second way when the academia helped is in coming up with exploits for bugs which are just discovered. Let me give you a hypothetical example. Suppose that we are talking about 1994, and there is a bug which was discovered called the StatD buffer overflow. So there are quite a few of those. After Morris found fingerD buffer overflow, we found removedir buffer overflow, StatD appeared. The question is, how important was it? So an agency came to an academic center and said, "Look, can you exploit, can you find all exploits in all Unix systems that you have? And of course, we'll pay you for the little money." Now, a bug bounty person would go to a particular company and say, "Okay, pay me for this and I'll fix it." But here we had 10 companies that produced different versions of Unix systems. So bounty guy, once it's discovered and fixed, he recovers the price once. But in our case, in my example's case, was that this academic organization found all of them in lots of Unix systems. Again, very cheap. You just paid for the people who worked. And the third way is, in the academia, is academic labs. You have, at CMU had the CERT, which was the first one dedicated to fixing these zero-day flows, or reporting them and fixing them. Second one was, I don't know, maybe CAIDA at San Diego, and of course Citizens Lab at Toronto. Again, these are services, bug bounty costs zero. So the advantage of the academia is that you do not need, and I'll stop there, you don't need a large amount of money. The bounty is very small.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So I would like to ask you to prepare yourselves. I have 2 more questions to the panel, and then I will open the floor to the audience. Sandra, how would you define a successful bug bounty program? What would that look like?
The million-dollar question. A successful bug bounty program is one where there is a seamless process of reporting vulnerabilities and getting them fixed. And that is a lot harder than it sounds. And it's not so much, defining the bug bounty program. There are excellent bug bounty program producers like Yes We Hack, for example, out there. You don't need to think about the external part, getting the hackers, signing the hackers, ensuring that they are ethical, et cetera, et cetera. But it's more the internal processes, getting the business case for it. As I said, why should we pay for something that is being reported already? Getting that buy-in, because of course it costs money, paying out bugs, as you said, with being cheap with academia. But you want the bug bounty hunters, I guess you could say, instead of hackers, to look at you. If you're not a big corporation like Microsoft, we get a lot of bug bounty hackers because we've always been interested. Of course, we are a market leader, so of course there's a lot of interest in hacking Microsoft. But if you are like my previous employers, it's not as interesting. So you need, of course, to pay money to people to show an interest in you and getting that bounty. And just as an example, when we had the first pilot, because that's my recommendation, that you pilot it first, we ran out of budget, and it was quite a good budget, in 8 hours, despite the fact that we had both SLA, security tests for the software developer company that worked for us, as well as formal third-party PCI DSS penetration tests for that code. And still, we ran out of budget in the pilot after 8 hours, just to illustrate that regular testing, high assurance, whatever, does not cover it all. You will always find vulnerabilities still. So you need these different minds, this diversity of thinking that a bug bounty program provides. So then getting to the hard part, just as you mentioned, Virgil, is, okay, so now we have a vulnerability. So how do we fix it? When do we patch it? Do we have, the business case to patch it? How do we integrate it into our existing backlog processes? How do we get the priority for it? All of that. So you need to work with a lot of different teams internally to get this to be a seamless process where there's a natural flow. And that takes a while. It took 2 years for us to get that seamless process, to get everyone to know that, okay, now we had a new bug reported, it's getting into the backlog, it's being prioritized, and then within, depending on severity, 15, 30, or 90 days, it's going to be patched. So the successful...
Optimistic.
Actually, it worked.
A lot of the bugs, a lot of CVS are not patched in most companies.
I agree with you, but in this case, it was for a specific, for the online commercial platform. Yeah. So that's specifically selected. And that is also part of it. You have to select the scope. You cannot do it on everything. Typically we talked about, what organizations are a good target for it. Well, of course, if you have external facing services, digital services, that's your scope. That's your natural scope. And then you have to select what is of priority to the business. So you need to be selective, and you need to have internal buy-in, and you need to have a seamless process of going from a reported bug into a fixed patch.
So processes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, the fun part. So Mats, coming from the platform perspective, how do you make sure that ethical hackers have good intentions, and how can bug bounty activities be conducted in a more controlled manner than, for example, publicly visible bug bounty programs?
Yeah. So first, coming to ensuring that they are actually ethical. So you cannot guarantee this 100%, like you cannot do in any company. or like even in this audience, like we wouldn't know, maybe. But what we do is first that we do a vetting of each individual. So we would ask that person to provide, for example, passport information, address information, personal details, so we know exactly who they are. And in our case, we use a Luxembourg-based bank to do a background check of them. So it's a know your customer control, which is similar to what, for example, Swedbank or SEB would do on us. So then we know that they are like, that they have rent mjöl i påsen.
Good intentions.
Good intentions. So that's the first step. So once they have been like approved on a high level, then there is something called public bug bounty programs and private bug bounty programs. Private bug bounty programs means that we control who are being invited to these kind of programs. And normally this starts in a very controlled manner, perhaps only like 10 ethical hackers from the beginning. And then you can expand that to like thousands, how many you want. It's really up to you. But then there are public bug bounty programs. Public, those are the ones that you see online. For example, Microsoft. You can search Microsoft bug bounty. You would see that directly. But the majority of all bug bounty programs are still private as of today. So you wouldn't know about them unless you get invited to them. And coming back to the vetting again. So in order to be invited to a private bug bounty program, and at least in our case, you need to have proven yourself on a public bug bounty program. And that is normally quite hard because the scopes that are on public programs, they are by nature hard to hack. They have been tested for several years normally. So once someone finds something on public programs and proves that they can communicate about the bug in an understandable way and everything, then we can start to invite them to private programs. So the ones that get into private programs are almost always good as well in what they're doing. So that's like how we do it. But I'm not sure about other platforms. But I guess it's similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, any questions from the audience? Stuart. Now, wait for the microphone.
I was in a Capture the Flag competition in Estonia about a year ago. And it was interesting because some of the vendors there were using the CTF competition as almost a form of bug bounty in a sense. And I'm trying to figure out, I wasn't sure, I mean, you know, I'm there. Is this ethical or not? I mean, do you see using these types of competitions as a form of bug bounty? Do we have any sort of opinions on that in the panel?
Anyone?
CTF programs are always fair, at least the vast majority that are ran. I'm familiar with one that we introduced at Carnegie Mellon maybe 10, 15 years ago called PICO CTF, where we focus on schools, on high schools, and they learn how to do hacking in high schools. But that's different from bug bounties. Very different activity. With bug bounties, people are looking for sometimes only recognition, and sometimes at the other extreme, they are looking for a lot of money, which means that they need a lot of amplification, which means that they don't go to a retail store who produces a one-of-a-kind piece of software. They go to Google or they go to SAP or, you know, where they get amplification. But that's not captured the flag.
No, I'm saying what happened, I know what captured the flag, it was just that this vendor had put up one of his new products up there and says, please try and hack this, and was sort of using this as sort of a marketing type of thing. And I was sort of part of the thing, I'm going, should we allow it type of thing, you know, like.
Okay, that's
think-
bounded, not
I
captured.
think that is a great idea.
Yeah.
You think it's a good idea? Okay.
I think it's a great idea because you have car companies that, like security conferences that have CTFs and they pay out either a car or money for it. You have, I think, IKEA, for example, have had their systems out on Swedish conferences. I think that gives us a employer branding too. It's a goodwill in a way, I think. And
Be more of it, that's all.
it should be more often, and probably we should do it in academia too, I think. Or what do you think?
I agree.
Who pays?
Yeah.
In academia, you don't get paid
Yeah.
for this.
But it doesn't matter. I mean, gamification. It doesn't matter if you do it for financial profit or for fame. And I mean, it's the same. It's just different.
No, there is a
valuation,
difference in
but it's-
terminology which is being confused. One is capture the flag. That's one activity with one set of customers. It's a competition, right? And the other one is a bug bounty, where there is a payoff. And I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but in the second example you gave, I think you're talking about bug bounty. Somebody puts a piece of software and says, hack you world and I'll pay you. Bug bounty. Does not capture the flag. Well, for whatever reasons they have it, not capture the flag.
Yeah, I would agree. It sounds like bug bounty.
Yeah.
But
But it's still ethical. It's not non-ethical. I
like,
guess that's the
it can
distinction
be
there.
marketing to show that you're
Public, yeah.
you're quite
Public
secure.
bug
It's hard to
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, one more question from the audience.
Yeah, a note on the panel composition. I think it would be interesting if we had, in the panel, someone who would represent the hackers or security researchers, because I've seen here, there's people from the platforms, people from the academia, people from business. I think it would be interesting to see, hear the perspective of, people who are trying for various reasons to get involved with these programs, even like to make money or to, become famous or whatever. And particularly, it would be interesting to learn how this, economic model of this whole thing is impacting them, and to what extent they're able to make a living, and especially if we're in Sweden, where we put a lot of emphasis on work-life balance and all these things. But I don't know. I don't have a specific question. It was just more of a note. So.
Maybe I can comment. Sure. Yeah. Sometimes we do actually bring hackers to, maybe not this here and right now, but we could bring hackers as well. I do know many hackers, and what I've learned is that it can be very hard, but many of them, they tend to focus on a particular organization or a particular scope or a particular, let's say, technology or types of vulnerabilities that they focus on. So if you're considering doing bug bounty yourself, don't start trying to do everything, is what I've learned from them. Start on some scopes, get to know those scopes very well before you trying to be all over the place. So the most successful hackers on many of the programs, they tend to stick to just that program for a while before they move on.
So we had an interesting discussion about the difference between this hacker pool that software producers uses, because they are focused on a class of vulnerabilities and a class of products, and bug bounty. The discussion was in the context of SAP, and the fellow who brought up the difference was Brad Arkin, who was the chief security guy at Adobe, and now he's a chief security officer at Cisco. So what he advised SAP to do is to build this pool of researchers, security researchers from out there, whom they would encourage to develop scenarios of penetrations of SAP products. And then once a year have a big conference. Of course, you pay them So they are not doing it for free. And they know that there is a steady stream of income if they do it. But then they have an annual conference in which they get acknowledged. That in no way is a bug bounty program. Very different. Bug bounty is more an ad hoc type situation, at least it used to be, in which a researcher comes to a company and says, look, I found this major vulnerability, and here is how it works, and tell me what you think it's worth, and I'll tell you what it's worth. So there is a negotiation. That's essentially what happened with Google, that's essentially what happened to Microsoft, and so on. Retailers are a very different activity, because their software doesn't scale. It's not used by hundreds of thousands of people. Nevertheless, they don't want their operations to be disrupted. They don't want to appear in the pages of the New York Times. So they are willing to pay as well, but not at the level of Google's and the rest, SAP and the rest.
But still clarifying that very few bug bounty hunters are doing it as a kind of a full-time job. It's not paying that much. Most are actually, if you look at it from a percentage, most are doing it as part of their kind of while studying, as part-time gig or whatever. So it's very few that actually are able to live off it.
Right. One more thing. What Brad Arkin was telling SAP at the time, which I found very interesting, was exactly what intelligence agencies do. They have pools of researchers outside the government, completely outside the government, and they don't even have to be in the country where the intelligence agency works. And they get hired in this pool of researchers that Arkin was recommending to SAP. Mm-hmm. And they are paid. Again, that's not a bug bounty. It's a different activity.
Okay. 2 more questions, starting with Musard and then down here.
Yes, I would like to hear your thoughts about relation between bug bounties and open source, because maybe this is more for the company. So you are using many open source products. So one easy way is just to support those, basically, and you don't even need to reveal that you're using those. So it's win-win for everybody. Are there any initiatives in this direction?
I can answer for Microsoft. Few people know that Microsoft is both one of the largest consumer as well as producer of open source software today. And of course, that is part of, I mean, if we use, which we do to a large extent, open source software.
Grudgingly.
Yeah. No, not
after
grudgingly
many years.
After many years, for sure, yes. But since 10 years, it's been willingly. Then yes, that is part of the bug bounty program. So it depends on the scope, it depends on the component being used, the code, etc. But it's not disqualified from a bug bounty program, no.
I want to tell you about Log4Shell. You know, the vulnerability that everyone had. At one point, I felt like the program wasn't going that well, and suddenly you got that kind of vulnerability internationally that people needed to handle. A lot of you probably have handled it. And you have developers that need to find that kind of vulnerability in your company, but you have agile teams that need to work around that and find the vulnerability themselves. And somewhere in your backbone, you feel like, hey, I haven't really found it everywhere. Somewhere it's going to be there, and I need some help. So at that point, I had Log4Shell as a vulnerability that was paid out more money, so that more people, we have 1,000 testers or hackers at this point. We have 600 people, employees in Avanza. So I have a bigger department than Avanza at this point. But just by feeling like, okay, we can put this on this policy that you should find that kind of vulnerability, that was a great thing. So I think that is going to happen more often, that kind of vulnerabilities that everyone has. And then you can put in a bit more money for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, so my question is related to actually what you said and also what Musard said. So bug bounty is basically ad hoc testing of gray box or black box software that you don't really know the details of, and you're not, you don't have the right to know the details of. And so, if you look at it from that point of view, from an engineering point of view, this is a really bad way of testing software, right? And moreover, the other people who are testing the same software might be redoing things you do, right? So wouldn't it be better to have a test suite bounty program where you submit your test suite? This is what I did, and the proper test suite. Maybe you found something, maybe you didn't. But even if you didn't find something, it gives other people the information about where to go, right? Like it would be internally. You do this, right? You're testing people, they do this, right? So why wouldn't you do it for the other people? That's my question.
Did you want to answer it?
No, you can go ahead.
No, of course we are doing a lot of tests internally and with consultant firms and all that. But I think it's a progress, like just starting a program and trying it out, and then we need to take action afterwards by seeing the results, and then we try new stuff. I think everything is about that. So your idea maybe is the next step, 2.0, maybe.
Yeah. So there is also, perhaps in the future it will be more like that. But as you say now, it's a bit random. Like we don't record what people have been doing anywhere. Like it's sort of the nature of the product as it stands today, that it's basically market-driven tests open to a lot of people. But I mean, why wouldn't that be possible to sort of integrate into the model itself?
And just to answer on that from a Microsoft perspective, I mean, having a bug bounty, a public one, is the best test to ensure that your internal processes are effective, right? So it's a kind of a test of your internal processes, ensuring that you have the internal testing, that you discover all the vulnerabilities. But the thing is that what you can never come out of, and just as I tried to illustrate, you need diversity in thinking. So even with the best checklist in place, you have the best tools in place, etc., there will always be new vulnerabilities to find. And you need that diversity of thinking to find them, which means that you need this great pool of people, security researchers, call it what you will. And the problem is if you just go to one pool like a security researcher, they eventually get formed in the same way by academia, by training. Not saying all, but typically.
Most of them don't have a degree.
But you need,
nothing to do with academia. They're just smart
variation.
people.
The smart people from various places, and that's what a bug bounty program or an open program gives you. That differentiator of thinking.
Well, talking about this, people, I was asked by a headhunter to keep entertain one of these researchers who worked for a major intelligence agency in the US. Why? Because he got bored. I mean, this fellow did not have any degree, was handicapped, was blind, and was a fantastic researcher. It turned out that I couldn't teach him much. What I had to tell him is what kind of research we do. I mean, he found it fascinating, but he went on to do other things. So researchers, not hackers, don't need to be affiliated with academia. They don't even need a degree at all. They are focused people, very focused, and very dedicated to what they do. And as you pointed out, they are focused on a product or a kind of attack. But with respect to Doug's question about testing, it's very unfortunate that security testing is a different activity. So there are two kinds of activity. One is penetration testing. The other one is security functional testing, compliance testing for various security policies. There you need coverage analysis. These people don't know how to do coverage analysis. Instead, what they do fuzzying. Right? Why? Because it's cheap. They throw cycles at the problem and think that they are okay. Well, what good does it do? Fuzzing is a great technique, right? But that's not security testing because there is no coverage analysis. So when you talk about black box testing, which is what a lot of these researchers do, very challenging because they can't look inside. They can see sometimes the binaries, but often if they try to hack a cloud, they don't even have access to binaries. I'm in awe of these people who do such a fantastic job without completely blind, meaning that it's completely a black box. No academic degree, by the way.
Okay, we're almost running out of time, but I have one final question for the panel. And you may answer in any order you like. And here's the question. If you had a chance to pitch a national bug bounty program for Sweden to a decision maker within the government office, what would you say during such an elevator pitch? So remember, it has to be short, otherwise they will forget the answer. What benefits would you mention and what pitfalls would you highlight? Who would like to start?
If we could handle the security skills gap, would you do it?
Okay, that's a good one.
Okay, I don't have a catchy one, but I guess I would mention something about, like, of course, the crowd, the collective intelligence of the crowd, as the key advantage to them.
Perfect. Sandra?
I would also talk about the collective intelligence pool that you get access to. I would mention the pitfalls, of course. I would mention that it's not for every business, of course. It's only for the publicly available services, etc., and all the caveats. But I would definitely, just as Camilla Mats mentioned, the collective pool of intelligence.
So you're talking about the Minister of Defense?
Sure.
Okay, I would pat him on the back and say, buddy, you don't have enough people. Go out and get some of this and pay them and you'll be okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much to the panel. Big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you found this interesting and inspiring. And with that, Rolf, I hand the crowd back.
Okay, thanks very much. This is the closing. I would say let's be very brief here. And our goal basically for today was to explain to you CDIS a little bit better, that you get an idea of what we're trying to do, what our mission is, maybe what our plans are, to give you some insight about the research we are doing. And we wanted to inform and stimulate you a little bit, right? And if we achieve that, then we did a good job. I would like to thank all the speakers who gave presentations today. I'd like the panelists. I found it very interesting. It's a little bit outside what I'm normally doing, but it's great. We had very good local arrangements. I think Annika Wendell and her team did a great job. I would like to thank us for organizing the poster program. I'd like to thank some of the students who helped. And I would like to thank you for coming here, sitting through the presentations, and hopefully learning something. We plan to put the slides plus the videos that we have been producing online as soon as we can. Here I also would like to thank Black Box Communications who did the media today. I think they did a wonderful job. And I think that's about it. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, right? Normally I'm asking if there is anybody in the room who wants to say something. Yes, sir.
We should thank Rolf for organizing this day also.
All right, thank you. Okay, as you know, we do this once a year. Then I would say we close for today and we meet next year, same time, same place. All right.